Welcome to the Gridiron Expert. I'm Connor Hibbett. Next up on our team previews, we're going to be looking at the Louisiana State University Tigers, some known as the Bayou Bengals. I actually grew up as an LSU fan, and pleased to welcome Zach Nagy to the channel. Zach, thanks for being on the channel.
Yeah, of course, man. Excited to talk some ball. Just got spring camp in the rearview mirror, so kind of got an opportunity to evaluate this team, see who we're working with moving into the off season or kind of phase two of the off season rather. So excited to talk some ball and get to it.
So before we get into the position groups for LSU, Zach, please tell our followers, subscribers, viewers where they can find your content.
Yeah, for me, man, my personal page is at znaggy20 on Twitter or X, whichever one people want to call it nowadays, and kind of just putting out some content on there daily. And then for the LSU Sports Illustrated page, it's going to be at LSU Tigers SI, putting out LSU football, baseball, basketball, recruiting, transfer portal buzz. I tell everybody, man, if it's purple and gold related, we've got it on the site, so make sure to check it out.
Awesome, awesome. Well, LSU did a fantastic job in the transfer portal, and a lot of those bigger name players are going to be coming in on the defensive side of the football, which we'll get to here shortly. But we'll start on the offensive side of the ball, and we'll start at quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier returns, and Garrett Nussmeier has one of the highest ceilings in college football, one of the top quarterbacks returning in the country for this season. Zach, what is the expectation ultimately for Nussmeier in this passing game? The receiving core is going to be great again, which of course we'll get into as well. But Nussmeier, what's his ceiling, you think, for this year?
Yeah, I think when you look at his overall ceiling, it's a Heisman Trophy winner. I think when you look at the new betting odds that have been coming out, those kind of way too early odds, you see Nussmeier near the top, if not at the top. I think there's a lot of hype, a lot of expectations coming into this year, and it's for good reason. He sharpened his skill set a lot over the last couple of months, and I think that next phase of development for him is really going to be continuing to kind of sharpen the IQ and really live in the film room so that he makes better decisions. I think decision making is really going to be of the utmost importance. So Garrett's got an arsenal to work with. That receiving core is really phenomenal. We'll get into that, of course, but the ability for this offense to kind of have a more balanced attack with the passing game and the rushing attack, I think it'll do wonders for Garrett. I think last year they were super one-dimensional, and so now you kind of move forward into this year, and if you have a more balanced attack, it'll take a little bit more pressure off of him, become less kind of predictable from an offensive standpoint. So I think that ceiling is obviously a Heisman Trophy winner. He's going to be in that conversation. I firmly believe that as he continues to evolve. But for him, man, this is a guy who has tremendous hype coming into the year. There's a ton of buzz, and it's for good reason. I'm excited to see how it shakes out.
You mentioned the receiving core. Yeah, this is 100% a phenomenal group here. There's no doubt that this is one of the best receiving cores in the nation. But I want to ask you, is there going to be an alpha, you think, in this group? Or is it three to four guys that are going to have, say, 700 plus receiving yards?
Yeah, I think when you look at this receiving core as a whole, I mean, you have six bodies that can really just be plug and play guys off the bat. It starts with your returning pieces, of course, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, and Xavier Thomas. That's a trio that you can really fall back on if need be. And then throw Kyle Parker in the mix too. He missed a lot of the year in 2024 due to injury, but he's a player that when his number is called, he kind of lives up to the billing if need be. And then you look at the transfer portal additions: Nick Anderson, Oklahoma; Barian Brown, Kentucky; and then Destin Hill from Florida State's kind of a sleeper who hasn't really produced quite yet at the collegiate level, but one that has a lot of hype coming in just because of the intangibles that he has. So when the question is there going to be an alpha? It's hard to kind of pinpoint one just because there's so many mouths to feed in that room. But when you look at two of them, it's certainly Nick Anderson and I believe Aaron Anderson, two guys that can really separate themselves from the pack. Aaron's coming off of a big time 2024 season, really, really blossomed into a wide receiver one type player. Over 800 yards, 60 receptions, and a handful of touchdowns. I mean, he was fantastic. And then you take in Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, who's proven himself in the SEC, or I guess at the college level per se, not the SEC quite yet, just because last year during their first season in the SEC, he was kind of injured for most of the year. But a player that's a physical guy, can really get off his breaks well, a physical receiver that Garrett Nussmeier needs. So those two kind of stand out from the rest. And, you got a lot of bodies to work with, man. I'm excited to see how it kind of pans out moving forward.
And then you mentioned Barian Brown there coming in from Kentucky, and then Dane Key from Kentucky as well transferred to Nebraska. So we spoke with Nebraska about a week ago, and they were talking about how Dane Key is probably going to be one of their top 3 to 4 receivers. And then you look at Barry and Brown here, likely going to be at least one of the top 4 or 5 receivers for LSU this year. And yeah, Kentucky, like they had some good athletes last year. I know they didn't have a great record, but like they were, in terms of like their athleticism and they were better than their record suggested, probably
Yeah,
by
I'd agree with that. I think they didn't quite have the gunslinger or kind of the signal caller that they were looking for, and you couldn't maximize the potential that you had in the wide receiver room. And Exhibit A, we'll focus in on Barry and Brown. This is a guy who's an absolute just speedster, a lightning bolt, kind of lightning in a bottle is what a lot of people like to describe him as. So he's phenomenal in a bunch of different areas. He's a Swiss Army knife, obviously in the special teams game. He leads the SEC all time in returning touchdowns. So he's a phenomenal player with the ball in his hands in an open space, and that's how LSU is going to utilize him this year. So I think that those are three guys to really hone in on that LSU receiving room, that being Aaron Anderson, Nick Anderson, and Barry and Brown. Throw in Chris Hilton when healthy. It gives you four players that can make an impact right off the bat. So Nussmeier's got a lot of players to work with this season, that's for sure.
this receiving core. Would you say it's top 5, top 10? What would you say?
Yeah, I'd say top five. I think from top to bottom, you have players that can really just come in the game at any point in time and make an impact. I think I rattled off six names that can really, really shine, and that kind of just been the buzz moving forward through spring camp. Like you have so many players that are fantastic, and a lot of different kind of, I guess, skill sets is the best way to put it. You have Barry and Brown and Aaron Anderson, who you can get the ball in space and have them turn it upfield. Then you have the vertical threats in Chris Hilton and Nick Anderson, who have really showcased their skill set during spring camp as well. So you have a nice variation of players to work with. It's a unique blend of returning players and obviously newcomers through the portal. I think the coaching staff did a really good job on the recruiting trail to go out and get some impactful players for Nussmeier. It's kind of an all-in approach this year, man. I think with Nussmeier back this year, they've really proven they're willing to up the ante on the NIL front, go and secure some top talent, and give him some players to work with because this team has the talent offensively for sure.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that it was a bit of an unbalanced offense last year. Is the expectation for the running game to take off this year, or is it just get a little bit better? What's the expectation for the running back room?
Yeah, it's unique. I think you had one of the better kind of offensive lines as a whole when it came to individual players, but it just seemed like they couldn't gel as one during the 2024 season. You had four players from that offensive line get drafted in the 2025 NFL draft, obviously headlined by Will Campbell, Emory Jones, etc., which couldn't quite get the run game going for some reason, whether it was run schemes or kind of just pulling Will Campbell on the outside. It just wasn't going right for this team. So now you move forward to this year, and yes, you have a new offensive line. You're going to have four new starters coming into this year. Obviously, you have to replace those guys that left. And so this is going to sound contradicting, so bear with me here. You got new guys and you have fresh faces, but I think if you simplify things with the new players, it's going to make things a lot easier for the rushing attack. You bring in Caden Durham back again from last year, where he really was a freshman phenom for this program. Over 1,000 all-purpose yards, got in the end zone over a handful of times. Was just a really good player in the 2024 season as a true freshman. You have Caleb Jackson, who's kind of the veteran in the locker room now, who's looking to really bounce back this year in 2025. Was extremely underwhelming last year. So you're looking to get him in a groove. And then your third back is none other than the number one running back in America, Harlem Berry, who's really showcased just a dynamic play style during his time in Baton Rouge so far throughout spring camp. So that's a three-headed snake that you can really work with that can develop the rushing attack in 2025. I think it's a recipe for success, but this offensive line is really going to showcase how far this team can go, and it starts with the rushing attack and what they can kind of produce.
So you mentioned some of those offensive linemen from last year that now depart. It was probably the best tackle combo in the country last year that LSU had. And so, yeah, 4 new starters up front for the Tigers this fall. Are there like there's a difference between having like an unknown and then like questions and then concerns. Like there's different levels here. What would you say LSU's offensive line is going into this year? Is it a concern or is it just a little bit of an unknown?
I would say just a little bit of an unknown, just because you have a bunch of puzzle pieces, right? And they're scattered all over the place, and you got to get the puzzle pieces and put it together. And you have 3-ish months to do just that before week one at Clemson. So you've got the talent and you have a ton of versatility. It's just about plugging them into the spots that really need be. Headlined by Josh Thompson, Northwestern transfer, who they expect to come in as a versatile player who can make a bunch of different impacts, whether it's at a tackle or guard. I think his bread and butter is going to be as an interior offensive lineman at the guard spot. So I'm excited to see how that pans out. And then the other offensive lineman that you went and got, Braylon Moore. He's a center from Virginia Tech who's proven himself in the ACC, but your lone returning piece from last year is DJ Chester, who was your starting center from a season ago. So there's a position battle brewing there. The current expectation is that Braylon Moore will be your starting center, and then you'll slide over DJ Chester back to his natural position of guard, which is what he was recruited as out of high school. So you got a lot of different pieces to work with. Those 3 to 4 kind of spearhead finding the perfect puzzle, but it's fun to work with, man. You got a lot of guys that you can throw in the mix. I didn't even get to mention former 5-star Weston Davis, who's pretty much locked in as your starting right tackle. So a lot of names that I threw out there at one time, but the guys that I'm looking forward to this season are Weston Davis, Braylon Moore, Josh Thompson, and of course DJ Chester.
And then at left tackle, is it going to be Tyree Adams, likely?
Tyree Adams for me can be penciled in as a starter. He's coming in as some big shoes to fill. Obviously, what Will Campbell was your starter for the last 3 years, but that's kind of the current expectation is that he's going to be your starter at left tackle. He didn't really flinch this season during spring camp. He started at left tackle and went through the entire 15 plus practice schedule as the first team guy.
What does the depth look like behind the starting offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's a very valid question. It starts with true freshman Carius Kern. He was a 5-star guy out of high school when stole him out of Arkansas and brought him down to the boot. And I think the expectations are really high for him. Had the opportunity to watch him up close and personal during the entire spring camp time. I've had the opportunity to talk with him on numerous occasions. And he's a good kid with a good head on his shoulders and is prepared to make an instant impact. And on National Signing Day, when this kid put pen to paper, Brian Kelly said he's physically ready to play in the SEC. So when I look at kind of that quote unquote sixth man, it starts with Carius Kern. He's 6'5", 350, 355 plus. I mean, he's a menace of a true freshman. So when I look at the depth of this team, it starts with Carius Kern and then continues to go into guys like Paul Mabenga, who's going to be an offensive guard for this team. Obviously, you can keep moving down the list. Solomon Thomas, who is a guy that they went and got, flipped him from Florida State at the buzzer, and he's a 4-star, borderline 5-star player too. So those 3 guys kind of spearhead the second team on the offensive line, and you're going to see a lot of plug and play kind of players. You got a lot of versatility and a lot of depth that you can work with.
No doubt that the ceiling for this LSU offense is one of the highest in the country. But if LSU is to live up to that ceiling on the offensive side of the football, what position group do you think needs to stay healthy?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it's going to come right back to that offensive line. I think games are won and lost in the trenches. It's a pretty casual cliche that a lot of people like to use, but it's valid. I think games are won and lost in the trenches, and when you're replacing 4 starters from a season ago and your rushing attack was pretty non-existent in 2024, it's all going to start with the offensive line. Can they give Garrett Nussmeier time in the pocket for plays to develop? Can they give the running backs an opportunity to kind of get the game going and diversify the playbook so that they can get the rushing attack going? So you know what you got at wide receiver. You're loaded. You got Garrett Nussmeier back in the fold as well, a returning starter in the SEC, one of the most productive returning players in college football. You have Caden Durham in the backfield. Your skill positions are locked and loaded. Now it's about having your offensive line get in a groove and allow those players to succeed in 2025. I think that's going to be kind of that X factor for this team. If they succeed, this team will succeed in a big way in 2025.
What does the tight end room look like for this year? Because like Mason Taylor was a great tight end the last couple of years, last few seasons. But who do you think will the tight ends be as featured as what we saw the last couple of years? And if so, who are going to be those guys that we have to keep our eyes out for?
Yeah, I think Mason Taylor is probably one of my favorite Tigers over the last decade or so. Just a true go-get-'em type of player. Just really a really solid safety net for Garrett Nussmeier last season. But now it's kind of the post-Mason Taylor era in the tight end room. And it starts with a guy like Trey'Dez Green, who was a 4-star, 5-star guy coming out of high school, number 1, number 2, depending on what service you look at, tight end in America. So He's a 6'6" player who's 245 pounds. That's just a versatile weapon. He's more of a receiving threat, not the type of guy who's thrived at putting his hands in the dirt just yet. But that's where Oklahoma transfer Bauer Sharp comes in the mix. This is a player who has SEC experience, led the Sooners in receiving yards and receptions last season over there in Norman. So he's produced in the SEC. And for me, Connor, if you were to ask me my spring camp winner from the 20 from camp so far last year, it was Bauer Sharp. I mean, he was fantastic over that 15 plus practice kind of stretch. So I was really impressed with Bauer Sharp. He's a dynamic, balanced player, can put his hands in the dirt and block, can peel off and be a receiving threat if need be for those short and intermediate routes. So it's a nice blend in the tight end room with Trey'Dez Green and, of course, Bauer Sharp. I think you're going to see a lot of 12 personnel this season, and I think you'll see them featured as much as last year, if not more, just because you have a nice blend of talent in that room.
Yeah, and maybe no, like, Mason Taylor, but the depth is probably stronger this year than what it's been in recent years. Would you say so? In the tight
Yeah, I
end
would
room?
say so. I think when you look at Bauer Sharp and what he brings to this team, that's that savvy vet that you need, obviously in the locker room, but of course in the tight end room too, if we're honing in on that position group. So it starts with Trey'Dez Green, but it ends with Bauer Sharp. I think those two are phenomenal players. Not to mention also going out and getting Texas A&M transfer Donovan Green as well, who's battled the injury bug the last 2 years, but gets that fresh start in Baton Rouge. I think he's a player that can make an impact if need be. Not quite sure how much his number will be called this year, but if you're working with a 1-2 punch of Trey'Dez Green and Bauer Sharp, I think you're really setting yourself up in a good way in 2025.
So the LSU offense is likely to be one of the top offenses in the nation for the third straight season. Um, the question the last couple of years, and there's no getting around it, has been the defense. But this year, the defense, given what they bring in from the transfer portal, obviously the floor is higher, but I think the ceiling is also higher. So the ceiling is probably as high as it's been since 2021, 2022 for this defense. We'll start up front. They bring in a couple of guys, namely Patrick Payton from Florida State. They also just recently got the guy from South Florida from an interior defensive line position here. What is the outlook for this defensive line? Do you think that this group can be significantly better than what it's been the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think you can't get much worse defensively, right? They've had their struggles over the last couple of years, and I think it obviously starts once again in the trenches. I know I sound like a broken record here, but I think that this edge rushers room is the most talented position group on defense easily. I don't even think it's a question. I think it starts with Patrick Payton from Florida State, like you mentioned, and then you start with other guys like Jack Pyburn from Florida, Jamari Butler from Nebraska, and then returning piece Gabriel Relaford. I think your two deep depth chart at the edge rushers position is incredible. I think these guys are sensational players. I think living up to the hype is going to be hard because the expectations are high in that position room, but you have some players that can get in the backfield and wreak havoc. So I'm excited to see how they do. And then kind of moving into the interior slot, you have two returning pieces in former five-star Dominic McKinley, who's coming off of a freshman campaign where he really kind of started to showcase his skill set towards the end of the year. And then Ahmad Bro, who made the move to the inside slot last year as a true freshman and impacted the game in various ways. So those two guys that are returning paired with the newcomers in Sadir Mitchell from Texas and Bernard Gooden from South Florida. Again, that's another two deep depth chart that puts you in a good spot, man. I hate to be here and kind of sunshine pump this team as a whole when it looks defensively, but I'm excited to see how the defensive line works out. Namely, the edge rushers group. They're fantastic. It's probably the best group on the team. It rivals that wide receiver core, of course.
So, just with that defensive front, and you mentioned it always starts up front defensively, just like it does on the offensive side. I mean, do you think this defense overall, and we'll get to the linebackers and the secondary here in a second, but because of that defensive front and how aggressive they could be this season, do you think this defense ultimately could be what, like top 6 or 7 in the SEC and be top, what, 20 to 25 nationally?
I think nationally, the goal would be to take a step forward and become maybe a top 45 defense in college football. I think they have all the talent to do just that. And I think with the offensive weapons that you have, man, if that defense is top 40, top 45, it's hard to not look at this team as a college football playoff team in 2025. That's the goal and the expectations when it comes to me when seeing this team. It is obviously a CFP squad, but I think if that defense can near that top 50 slot, I know I'm going down a little bit more, but I think if you can get around top 40 to top 50, I think you're going to be in a good position.
And we're going to see just how legit this defense is right away because they're going to be going to Clemson to start the season off. We'll get into the schedule here in a second. At linebacker, I mean, Whit Weeks is that dude, and then Harold Perkins is a tremendous athlete. I mean, the when you look at this linebacker room from an athleticism perspective, they have all the tools. What is your outlook for the LSU linebackers in 2025?
Yeah, I think it starts with Whit Weeks, man. This guy's a shot out of a cannon on every single play. He's a freak. I mean, he's a freak of nature, and obviously he's going to be bouncing back from that really gruesome ankle injury that he suffered in the bowl game. Man, that was abysmal. I mean, it was tough to watch. But what I've been told is that he's nearing 100%, and he's really rounding the corner and going to be ready for June, and that's for summer workouts. So to shake back from a broken ankle that quickly and really get back up to speed and moving at full speed in football drills is key. And I'm told that he's going to be ready for June for summer workouts. So that's a big time get for this team so that he can get into the summer workout, weight room, and conditioning program this offseason. And then obviously, aside from Witt, you have Harold Perkins, who's going to be working at the star role, which is more of a hybrid linebacker safety position for this team. And I think that that could be his bread and butter, man. I think it gives him the chance to drop back in coverage if need be, but really play closer to the line of scrimmage and wreak havoc in the backfield too. So those are two guys to keep tabs on, of course. I think right next to obviously Whit Weeks at the linebacker slot is going to be Devon Keys, who's a sophomore coming back last year after a pretty phenomenal freshman campaign. The numbers don't jump off the page, but he had to play a big time role after West Weeks got hurt. That's Witt's brother. And then, of course, Harold Perkins going down with a torn ACL. So it was nice to see that freshman kind of step in the mix and make an impact. So those three guys at the linebacker spot are who you're going to keep tabs on. It's going to be Whit Weeks and Devon Keys at linebacker, and then Harold Perkins at star, where he's playing a hybrid linebacker safety kind of spot.
And then, of course, we'll finish the position groups here with DBU. Are they going to live up to the reputation of DBU this fall? I mean, they bring in a couple of guys, including Delane from Virginia Tech, and a lot of Virginia Tech folks were really high on him going into last year. So I mean, that's a quality pickup from the transfer portals. Or there's a couple of younger guys like DJ Pickett coming in as a freshman, very very high ceiling in the future for the Tigers. What's the expectation for this secondary? It used to be the strength of LSU. Do you think it could be a strength once again?
Yeah, I think if you were to ask me that question a month ago, I would have been a little bit shaky on it just because the safety room didn't necessarily have the bodies that you needed. They needed to up the talent level, they needed to up the competition, and they did just that. So, kind of starting off first with the cornerback room, of course, it starts with a guy like Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech. He's a Swiss Army knife in the defensive backfield, can play cornerback, nickel, safety. He can really be a plug and play guy in a bunch of different spots. So, going and getting him from the transfer portal was big. And then you pair him alongside Jakeem Jackson, who they got from Florida, a guy who has SEC experience and can really move the needle if they throw him on the field. Because I think that, this is a guy who can make an impact. He's not being talked about enough, I feel like. So Mansour Delane and Jakeem Jackson are the two transfers that you brought in the cornerback room. Your returning pieces are, of course, going to be Ashton Stamps, PJ Woodland, etc. I think you're going to see a lot of them this year. But kind of rounding out that cornerback room, you can't not talk about DJ Pickett, the number one cornerback in America, a five-star guy who's just receiving so much buzz in Baton Rouge. It's phenomenal. The coaching staff is high on him. The players are high on him. I had the chance to talk to Mansour Delane, and he said that he lives up to the hype. He's as good as advertised, were his exact words. That five-star plus kind of ranking that he has, he lives up to that, is what Mansour said. So the cornerback room is in a good spot. Corey Raymond retooled it in the best way. And then you look at the safety room where there's a couple of question marks. AJ Halsey and Tamarcus Cooley are the newcomers that you brought in through the portal. Two fantastic players that have produced at their previous stops. Now it's about upping the competition level in the SEC. Excited to see how they pan out this year, man. I think the safety room has the chance to be special. It's just a matter if they hit or not. But when you're looking at this defensive backfield and that quote unquote DBU name, it starts in the cornerback room. You've got a lot of talent.
So, I mean, by the sounds of it, I mean, it looks like this defense could be. I mean, I don't want to like throw out a number there and like be. I don't want to throw the expectation like too high here. I don't want to make it too high, but it looks like they could be a top 30, 35 defense, really.
There's a chance that this team, if all hits right, can be extremely, extremely talented this year, man. You have a lot of moving parts, a ton of versatility, and that was the coaching staff's goal, was to add defensive versatility to where you can plug players in different spots. In the secondary, you have just that. Up front, you have a lot of moving parts, obviously with your edge rushers that can kind of drop back at the jack roll and make a bunch of different moves there, headlined by Patrick Payton. So, yeah, to keep it short and sweet, yeah, yes. I think that this team, if all things hit right, could definitely be a top 35, top 40 defense.
On the defensive side of the football, what is a position group that needs to stay healthy, similar to that question I asked you on the offensive side?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, your defensive line, I keep talking about the two deep depth chart. You have a bunch of bodies in the edge rushers room that can make an impact. Obviously, on the interior, you now add Bernard Gooden from South Florida that gives you some more versatility, some more depth in that room. We just went on and on about the defensive backfield. I think the one room that I didn't get to talk too much about was the linebacker room. I think if you lose maybe a Whit Weeks or a West Weeks, you're in a pretty thin spot. I think you need to stay healthy at the linebacker spot, keep that second level of defense healthy, because if one or two of those guys go down, you're going to be put in a pretty unique spot where you're going to be playing some youngsters who are unproven. So the one spot on defense that you got to stay healthy, in my opinion, is linebacker. I think it's the one room that doesn't have as much depth as the other spots.
You mentioned from the get-go here that if LSU lives up to their ceiling, this is no doubt a playoff team, and potentially even better, you're looking at potentially making a deep run in the playoff if LSU hits their ceiling and if all these transfers also hit as well. What should be ultimately the expectation? Because we've talked about like there's still some unknowns with the offensive line. How will all these transfers on defense mesh? There's little to no doubt about the passing game on the offense. But when you throw in again some of the transfers, the unknowns, what should be the expectation for LSU football in 2025?
Yeah, Connor, I think the expectation is a college football playoff team. I think if this team does not make the college football playoff, I think you're going to have a lot of unhappy LSU fans in Baton Rouge. I think you're heading into year four of the Brian Kelly era. He hasn't cracked the college football playoff just yet. He hasn't gotten over that hump. And now you bring in 18 newcomers through the transfer portal, a top 10 2025 recruiting class, paired with returning players like Whit Weeks, Harold Perkins, Garrett Nussmeier, etc. I think from a roster construction perspective, you're in a really good spot. You obviously up the ante on the NIL front to bring in 18 transfers with double digit immediate impact players. So I think the floor should be a college football playoff team. I think this team has the talent. You bring in obviously an elite coaching staff again from last season. I think you're in a good spot, man. I think if this team doesn't make a college football playoff run, I think it'll be a failure of a 2025 season. You have the talent, and I certainly think that this team can do just that. They're that deep, that talented, and you have a solid coaching staff to get them in the right spot as well.
Who is a player to for people outside of LSU to keep in mind of going into the year that could be a breakthrough player if LSU hits their ceiling, besides like a Garrett Nussmeier or a Nick Anderson or an Aaron Anderson, besides those kind of players, what's another player to keep an eye out for and someone that could be responsible again if LSU hits their ceiling?
Yeah, I think it starts with the safety room. I think you've struggled in that area last year tremendously. Major Burns and Jordan Gilbert just didn't quite cut it in the safety room. So now you go out and get two immediate impact guys into Marcus Cooley and AJ Halsey. So for me, you can kind of pick your poison, but I think either to Marcus Cooley or AJ Halsey, if one of those two guys hit and really allow that safety room to blossom into what they can be, I think that that could be an X factor for this team in 2025 for sure.
Well, I'm really excited to watch this relatively new look LSU football team going into the other Death Valley against Clemson. And I mean, those are two teams when you look at the top of college football this year, there's a window of opportunity for more teams to potentially win a national championship this year than there oftentimes is going into a respective season. And both, LSU, Clemson, in terms of like the preseason power ratings and the SP Plus that was just announced earlier today, these are teams hovering around that 8, 9, 10-ish range. And so the winner of this game, the winner of that game, will have an opportunity, a greater opportunity to hit that double digit regular season win mark and then potentially get a top seed in the college football playoff. Well, Zach, we really appreciate you being on the channel. One last time for our viewers, tell them where they can find your content.
Yeah, for sure, man. On Twitter or X, whichever one you want to call it, it's at Znagy20. That's at Znagy20. Of course, you can hop on there and see what I'm putting on the personal page. And then for the LSU Sports Illustrated page, it's going to be at LSU Tigers SI. I say it on a lot of the appearances I do. If you're not on social media, just go into your nearest search engine, Google, Firefox, Safari, you name it. Just punch in LSU SI or LSU Sports Illustrated, and man, you'll find anything you need, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, recruiting. If it's purple and gold related, it's on the site. So make sure to check it out.
All right. Well, really good job, Zach, and thank you again for being on the channel.
Of course, mine. I appreciate it.
Yeah.